involved in Doge. And so the point is, Trump is clearly surrounded by these people who have this philosophy. We also looked at Curtis Yarvin, who is the guy that influenced J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and his philosophy. I mean, this is the modern technocrat movement. And just one other point before I pass it on is, I had somebody say, Derrick, a map from 1940s is irrelevant to today. This is only about oil. Again, I'm not discounting that it is about oil in some ways. But I think to say that and just dismiss it, because that's what they would like you to believe. You go to the Wikipedia page for technocracy, it says it's a failed movement that petered off by the 1940s, 1950s. But you have to remember that in the 1970s, Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote his infamous book, The Technotronic Era, where he went from calling it technocratic to technotronic, America Between Two Ages. And he described essentially a revival of the technocratic movement, which is when he and Rockefeller started the Trilateral Commission. That is the movement that they've been building since then. So the 1940s is just the beginning, the Technocracy Inc., all that sort of phase of the technocracy idea. Then the 1970s, and then of course this continuation of it with the Great Reset and everything we're seeing today. And to that point, Brzezinski's book, the Technotronic Era, it describes a world police state. It describes the end of privacy, the end of liberty. It just pitches it like the technocrats did, as it's going to be better for everybody. But also, last point, the Trilateral Commission, which Zabriskie was involved in before his death, in 2023, they said that was the beginning, the year of the New World Order. You can look it up. The Trilateral Commission's meeting, they said this was the official beginning of what they were calling the New World Order. And I think we're just, as somebody said earlier, we're at the point of the acceleration. We all know about the date of 2030. Well, it's 2026, guys. It's not just going to happen overnight. Like, this is a progressive thing that we are witnessing, and it's just becoming more and more obvious.
I want to say thanks for having me. Sure. I got to drop off. I hope people will consider donating. If people are in a position where they have more time than money, there are free things you can do to support all the shows. You can subscribe to them. You can share them. It's easy to do. You can rate the shows, which seems like nothing, but actually matters with this. You can get on everybody's email newsletter. If we get separated or thrown off of a platform, Corbett's been talking about this forever. It's important that we have a way to communicate. We didn't just wake up and decide that we're not doing it anymore. It's probably that we got thrown off of a platform. So if there's a way to sign up for somebody's email newsletter, then that at least gives us another opportunity. When I hosted a workshop at Anarchapulco where we had content creators, we asked what the number one thing, they all said the exact same thing. It was really important to them to stay in touch with the audience. So if you're the audience and you like these shows, sign up for the emails. Just do that. Make sure to do it. Thanks everybody for having me. Also, independent media token is something new that is on the Solana blockchain. Corey Hughes and I've been working on that. It's a way to help to finance some of the projects that we're working on. I think we have a lot of digital shovel-ready projects that people are just waiting on some funding to launch, and that's a way to do that. So if people are interested, they can check out Independent Media Token as well. And thanks everybody for having me on. And I'll catch you guys later.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate you, brother. I'll bring this up. Corey might be joining today. I'm not sure if he has the time. I reached out and he might be able to make it. But he's the creator of the Independent Media Token. And a few of us are on the board of this as it grows, and hopefully it'll become something. The point is simply just to basically give away free, basically no interest or no, free money, basically, not a loan, but give money away to people whose projects we believe are going in the right direction or whatever else. And I think that's what independent media needs. So thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Greg Reese, who just popped in as well, and I'll back out, let Derrick come back in. But I just want to echo, pretty much everything Charlie just said. First of all, I think it's important that we continue to help each other. But back to the conversation that I'm just fascinated by, and I think this is such an important one, where this goes. And it overlaps with something that I think is very important to this that we brought up before, and this has to do with, so Derrick's point in his article about the larger technocratic drive around these different moves, Greenland and so on, and the threats of Mexico. In my opinion, as they were outlining, is that this is about something much larger. I really do think it is just the extension of the Great Reset that's happening under the Republicans, like it was under Biden, and it's the same endpoint, really, with different flavoring. And I can't stop seeing the overlap of this with the network state agenda, the charter city discussion, the freedom city discussion, all funded the same, and really smart city, 15-minute city. It's the same point. And it's the same funding mechanism. And people have different views of this, which I'm happy to get into. I just think what we're looking at is an obvious transition of society being driven by technocrats and social engineers. And it's very clear the funding from Pronomos Capital, which is, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and Andreessen Horowitz, funding these many different places, Greenland being one of the main locations that they brought up. Now, I don't know if that's the driving force behind why they're going after Greenland, but it was brought up before Trump made these statements that they wanted to turn Greenland into one of these freedom cities. And it's very important, the overlapping discussion in the United States of freedom cities. That's the same movement, the same people. So I'm worried about this being framed as a freedom movement to people that think they're fighting for that and may even have good intentions and inadvertently supporting what was the Great Reset they were fighting 30 seconds ago. That's really my biggest concern. But I'll open up to the table and bring Derrick back in.
Hey, would you mind if I just hopping on what Derrick was talking about? I know Hervoy has covered this quite a bit too, about the TechNate. Do you see that link that I shared is from Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, in the chat there of he's got a map of Gran Colombia, and he's proposing to put that together again and to turn it into something that's just like the European Union. That's his exact words. And it came 3 days. Yep, there it is. 3 days after talking with Trump, so that Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, was going back and forth with Trump for a couple years now. They had a phone call on the 7th. Then Petro posted this on the 10th. And he proposes putting all this together. That's Panama, that's Colombia, that's Venezuela, that's parts of Brazil, the Orinoco parts, Ecuador, I think, is there as well, and Peru. So everything you're saying, like, man, it's really accelerating there. But of course, Petro's going to be out in a couple months. They're going to have a new president.
Look how similar that is to the technocrat map. I mean, that's nearly identical. It's ridiculous.
So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, just because. Just how quickly those things are moving. Maduro gets captured. Trump and Petro are going at each other. Then all of a sudden they have a phone call and it's like kumbaya. So I just wanted to put that in there.
One thing I was hoping you could talk about, Derrick, too, is I know you're doing the People's Reset pretty soon in Morelia, which is the capital of Michoacan, which has a level 4 travel advisory now since Maduro got abducted. And I was hoping Charlie could talk about this too, because I think Greg Reese, you're talking in Puerto Vallarta and Acapulco, and they're talking about they moved it from Acapulco, which is also in Michoacan, and there's a travel advisory there and lots of other places in Mexico right now. And I noticed that just happened after the Maduro thing.
Sure, I could speak about Mexico, but hey, Greg, go ahead and introduce yourself, brother. Thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for asking me to come. I was honored to have Ryan reach out to me and invite me on. Hey, actually, and I canceled that. I canceled my engagement in Acapulco. I had to. So,
well, thanks for being here with us, brother. I think everybody here is probably fans of your work. For those who haven't come across Greg's edits and his short little mini documentary films, which have been inspiration for some of my own work, definitely check them out, man. And we've been live now for about an hour and 40 minutes. We're just going through some of the work we've been doing at TLAV. We talked about my story about the United Nations insider who just came out publicly on Wednesday directly to me. We're talking about my recent article on Venezuela and technocracy, everybody. We did just pass $8,000 a couple minutes ago. So thank you again, everybody who is contributing. We're about to hit 9,000. Wow. Brad Reed just gave $400. Guys, this is all going. Ryan and I will be splitting this money right down the middle so that we can continue to do our operations. He can continue to do his daily 4-hour epic breakdowns and pay me to do articles. And I will continue to do the other work that I'm doing, including documentaries and things of that sort. And since you asked, I will talk about the People's Reset in Mexico, unless anybody else wants to talk about technocracy first.
Yeah, one thing, and then I'll throw it to you to talk about that. At one point, we will be discussing a few different things at some point today. We're going to get into some future projects, more of Derrick's past work, other things we've worked on in general. Before we go into something next, Derrick, I want to throw it to you next. I want to make sure we also welcome Matt Weinglass from the Homeless Left. Go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself, brother.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me part of this panel today. I just want to say I've been totally inspired by you guys. And I think just to go back to the earlier conversation on censorship, I think that's the thing that got me into this space with the channel we started, The Homeless Left, just a few years ago. But it was a reaction to the fact that we weren't allowed to have conversations. That was the starting point for everything. So all of these issues, going into it in an honest way with critical thinking, skills, getting out of the tribal mindset. I think that was my draw to get into this space. And then to notice that it really is across the board. The people like Ryan, Derrick, all you guys, this is the people in this space that have to deal with censorship on a regular routine basis. Those are the people you want to listen to. That's just common sense. And it's just been fascinating for me to see that the relationships you guys have had for several years and the people that we're meeting here in this space from all sorts of places. And it's not like everybody agrees on everything. I think that's also been the sentiment here in this space. It's not about agreeing with everything. It's about sharing principles and values that we are consistent with our critical thinking skills when things develop, whether it's domestically, whether it's global issues. We are looking at everything, whether it's COVID, whether it's any of these war machine agendas, the propaganda machine. We are challenging it every day. And the people that have to deal with censorship are the people you want to listen to. And I think I have to say, when we started our YouTube channel, we got canceled right away. So the Homeless Left was terminated almost immediately when we started talking about COVID, started talking about Israel, started talking about these things immediately. And so I thought that, oh, we're dead in the water, we're done. But I noticed that people in this space, they reached their hands out and they said, this kind of qualifies you. It means that you're doing something right, that they're going to be sending you termination letters from Google. They're going to tell you that your conversations are dangerous. They're too dangerous for the community. We have to keep the community safe from conversations. And so I'm thinking that kind of is a badge of honor, that to be like that right out the bat. And I just have to say, I'm just grateful for the relationships we've been able to make so quickly in this space. And I'm totally champion what you guys have been doing. And just thanks for having me on. And I appreciate that consistency. And I think our audience does too.
Thank you for being here, brother. Great work that you guys are doing as well. Cool. Well, we've got an awesome, diverse group of people here. I will talk a little bit about Mexico, and then I will go to another story that we've done at TLAV, just to kind of show, again, some of the stories that people have reached out. And a number of the stories that I've broken with Ryan over the last 6 years, 5.5 years, have come because people have reached out and said, hey, I have this bit of information. I had this experience. Will you report on it for me? I heard you talk about this other thing. And then it, involves building relationship with that source, and it turns into all kinds of different things, either the UN story and some other more controversial topics that I'd love to get some opinions on here. But first, as far as Mexico, so I do live in Morelia, Michoacan, Mexico, which generally year round is a place that the US State Department tells you not to go to because of cartel activity. It is a big state, and there is cartel activity in part of the state, mainly the southwestern part of the state where I'm from. In the capital, in Morelia, I mean, it's like any normal city that you'd be in with 500,000 people and mountains around you. Your life is not in danger any more than it would be any other American city, maybe even safer than in some American cities, for sure safer in some American cities. So I don't notice and haven't noticed any kind of changes specific to Venezuela, other than I will say there have been protests out here against the US's involvement in Venezuela, which is kind of cool to see. And I did some reporting because I've been starting to do more reporting on the ground here in Mexico, in Spanglish, some, interviewing people in Spanish and in English with subtitles, stuff like that. And there was an assassination a couple months ago of a local mayor, about an hour and a half from where I'm at right now. And this mayor, his name is Carlos Manso, was very vocal against the cartel and speaking out against the current president, Claudia Sheinbaum. And some people believe may, run for president someday. But he was vocally opposing the cartel. He was going along with ride-alongs with his own police force, putting himself out there, telling citizens to arm themselves. And then he was violently gunned down and murdered. And when that happened, the country, and many places, but especially Mexico City and here in Morelia, people came from Uruapan, the town where he was murdered, the next day and protested at the governor's palace, which is here in Morelia, in the Centro area. And some of it got violent. There's questions from locals about whether or not it was provocateurs or not, but there was definitely hundreds of, almost thousands of people pissed off in the Centro here, making noise and basically saying the governor of this state is involved in the cartels, the president's involved. It kind of sparked a big movement, and including protests in Mexico City. And I did some reporting about that because you guys probably saw the videos going viral, because unfortunately people like mainstream alternative news people like Benny Johnson and Alex Jones were sharing the clips like Mexico's in a civil war against its Chinese communist president. And it was some violent looking clips of people fighting the cops that took place over about 2 hours one day. And the next day, the square is filled with old people dancing, like life was back to normal. But on Twitter, especially, people like Alex Jones take these clips and they play them everywhere, and they just build up all this hype, like Mexico's having a revolution. And of course, Trump has been saber rattling about wanting to get involved in Mexico, which is obviously fits into the technocrat plan as well. There's a lot happening. And you know, to speak to that on a more personal level, living here, but also we're organizing an event 2 weeks from now, the People's Reset's actually 2 weeks from yesterday. And there have been some people who, including our performers and speakers, who are like, is it safe for me to come? I'm seeing stuff on the news, you know, this and that. And it's because there's all that garbage out there. And honestly, I think most of it is just hot air. It's just saber rattling. But yeah, watching Trump go into Venezuela is like, holy shit, they might actually do it. It feels so kind of beyond the norm for me to imagine, like, no, there's no way that they would put US troops in Mexico, that they would actually do the drone bombing that they keep threatening. But at this point, I think anything's fair game. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. I also think one important point to remember on that, and then I'm done with it, whoever wants to jump in here, is that strategically, Trump and Canada and Mexico, they're going to be renegotiating the USMCA agreement this summer. I think that could be one of the reasons Trump is making all this noise. Maybe he's not actually going to do anything, but he's going to use this as kind of a bargaining chip when they come to renegotiate over the summer. And using the USMCA, the US government has already sued the Mexican government, because the Mexican government said they didn't want any GMO corn from the US. They're like, we don't want your soy, we don't want your corn. We're not even going to feed it to our animals. It went from that, like a really bold statement a couple years ago, we're banning all US GMO corn. The US said, hey, you're violating the USMCA agreement, we're going to sue you. And then they said, okay, we'll take the corn, but just for the animals. And I think they even got them down to just accepting it in general. But so my point is, these agreements are also a part of the kind of the conversation, or they should be right now, because maybe Trump will do something insane in Mexico. I just can't imagine. And yes, you know, I don't know. I don't know what we'll do or what things would look like, because people say, well, if cartels got scared enough, maybe they'll start kidnapping foreigners and things like that to sort of send a message to the US government. Who knows? Or if it's all just garbage. Because I mean, I think ultimately, on the bigger picture, these folks are all working together, you know, at the presidential and above level. As we know, presidents are just puppets. So yeah, that's my thoughts on what's going on in Mexico. I welcome anybody else's thoughts.
I'd like to jump in really quick and tell you what I think is going on, just because I usually don't try to share my opinion in the Reese report, but I guess stuff like this, you could talk about your opinion. I think it's all about a cataclysmic event. Russia calls it a pole shift. And I've been following this for over 20 years. And I remember hearing about global warming, I was talking about pole shift and found that fascinating. You know, that's what gave Randall Carlson his fame, really, was because on Joe Rogan, even, because that was the big stories they were talking about, was history's lost, which is what? Cataclysm. And so if you factor that, you could play a game with this. You could play a game, everything that's going on that seems weird. Well, explain this then, and you put it in the frame of not just cataclysm, but a cataclysmic event where somehow, now the big mystery here is the official story is it's a pole shift, and that story has been going on for a long time. Magnetic north has been moving faster every year exponentially for the past 100 years, I think. They've been talking about that since the 60s, and that's what Russia's saying. Russia's saying that it's about to flip. And so that's why they're spending billions of dollars up in the Arctic, because they're getting ready for a shipping lane. And that's why they're bringing in people, and they're encouraging, the Orthodox Church is heavily encouraging children. We need more people. We need more people. And the church is even saying that, the government's saying that Siberia is going to thaw. I was visited there for 6 months, and even a 20-year-old bartender knew all about this. So this is like mainstream news in Russia. And the church talks about it too. There's prophecies in the church saying that Siberia is going to thaw. And if you look at Siberia on a map, it's crazy. Siberia is bigger than America, I think, bigger than the United States. And they're saying all this land is going to be accessible. And they already have a shit ton of oil, and they already have a shit ton of minerals. And then with the Siberia thing, all that, they're going to have an incredible advantage, for one thing, when this thing all goes through. And this thing is, I came up with this. I'm sure you've all heard this. You know, it goes back from many different angles. Edgar Cayce to the U.S. Navy to, on and on and on and on. And the way that the United States is acting, the United States is not preparing for a gold rush. The United States is acting like a company, which it is, and they're consolidating and they're liquidating. That's what they're doing. They're letting the infrastructure go to shit because they know they're going to just wait for it to get hit and then they'll rebuild it then. They're building massive AI data centers so they can hopefully manage the surface. While who knows? Edgar Casey and the U.S. Navy both had maps that showed the east and west coastlines being gone. The maps are written, and there's a third one too. I can't remember the name, of different sources of predictions. Who knows? But it explains everything. It explains why all the infrastructure is actually being moved inland. It explains the Denver airport, why the Queen owns property around the Denver airport, or the Crown of England. It explains why the Bushes bought land in Paraguay, right in the center of South America. The biggest aquifer in South America is owned by the Bushes and the Crown of England. And that was 20 years ago. And it explains why they've hired the vultures to come in as managers right now in America, in the United States. Trump, perfect example. He doesn't, there's a lot of things about him that doesn't make sense. Maybe that's what to get the vulture just comes with total gross, like, that's the vulture. But that's their job, I think. It's not a pretty story, but that's what I think is going on. And that's why I came on here, is because what's going on in Mexico with Derrick Broze, from what I understand, is the solution. The solution, if you don't want to ride it out, maybe an old guy like me who's all alone doesn't mind riding it out. But if it's really important for you to find a solution, and it still is for me, I guess, too, is that community. And I don't think the system cares. As long as you're not in their way, you're going to be fair, I think, to do your own thing, create your own society where you can live and eat. And this is something, I'm kind of half hippie. I've been dreaming about that since I was a kid, of like somehow fending for yourself, growing your own food, all that. I still dream of that. And so it's time. That's not going to be obviously given to us because the governments are trying to prepare for an event. And politically, like I said, China looks pretty good too, actually, I think. But Russia is going to be in control. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. But the solution is what can we do? And I think the truth to that is, aside from being a hermit and just riding it out, we need each other. We need to connect. And so it's an absolute blessing that we have this ability right now to like connect worldwide. And we need to start, if we really want to thrive, I think, in my humble opinion, because I could just be a whack job. I don't know. This is just what I think. But in my opinion, that's what we need to do, is we need to make decisions, serious decisions. We might need to consider relocating. I'm certainly considering. I'm in a pretty good spot right now. I'm in Montana, in a little neck of the woods that is probably a decent spot. But I'm still looking at Russia. Siberia seems like an awfully exciting adventure, So I'm still open-minded, but I think we need to think about relocating if we haven't already, and we need to think about compromising and humility. And I'm not a Christian, but Jesus Christ to me certainly symbolizes a model to behave. If you could behave in a manner like that and keep yourself from getting killed, then I think you can go far in this world. But with each other, we really do need each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my long rant.
No, great. It's a very interesting topic. I'll bring Derrick back into to talk solutions, because he's the best person in my mind in the world to talk about that. But to your point, and I'd love to get into this more after that, is just the interesting point you're discussing. Now, first, I always say that whether or not you out there believe that that's what's happening, it's worth noting that I truly think you can prove that there are people in power that do and are acting as if, right? And you can make that point about a lot of very wild things. And, where there's people in power that believe this is what's happening, even if you don't think it is, and they act that way. And that can, help you understand why they might be acting a certain way. But there's some interesting discussions to be had about whether that is what's going on. And I even broaden it out to something I recently had an interview about. And you and I, Greg, have talked about this, the Yuga cycle conversation, the Kali Yuga. And I interviewed an expert on this, Dev Misra, and the point about this, basically, whether you think this is some supernatural event or rather just our ability as humans in, looking back and documenting history to outline, how we thought things were happening, that there seems to be a cycle of these cataclysmic events that you can prove. And there's a lot of theories around it. And so maybe very well that's what we're talking about. I find that fascinating, but we can talk about that more. Let me bring back Derrick to address your point about solutions. And really his work around this is what guides me on this point. And the idea that we need each other and that we can actually succeed in that. So go ahead, Derrick. Oh, looks like I can stay. We lost somebody. Go ahead, Derrick. Oh, I think you're muted.
I think Seven Seas has to leave in just a moment, so just want to give that brother a chance to say something.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor. Grateful to meet a lot of you for the very first time. Good to meet back up with a few of you that I've spoken with. Really, the only thing that I had to present was sort of like the standards and technologies that they're proposing for 6G that's sort of estimated to arrive in 2030. And it has to deal with basically a lot of the building blocks that, you know, we're seeing with technocracy, especially here in the United States, and how it's going to be sort of standardized as a communications protocol across the entire world. So anything that operates on 6G will be using a lot of these proposed technologies. I have a link in there. Standards proposed by like the IEEE, the ICT, the ITU, DARPA, the NSF, WEF, and things like that. So if anybody wants to, you know, discuss any of those things, or if anybody has any overlapping research that they maybe want to talk about with that, feel free. And thank you guys again for having me, and I wish you guys best of luck. And thank you to everybody on this panel that contributes in their own various ways and doing what they can to get the truth out there, just on matter of principle.
You're here.
Yeah, thanks for being here, brother. And shout out to Jason Bassler. He had to go as well. Jason with the Free Thought Project. If you don't follow them, please do. They're always making awesome memes and also writing original articles and aggregating articles like ours. Yeah, so there was, you know, some talk about exit and build, essentially, is what was being discussed there by Greg. And Greg and I talked a little bit about this on his podcast before. I did want to just take a moment real quick just to jump back to the fundraiser, which is why we're here, and just to thank everybody who's here with us on the panel, and those who are donating, everybody here who's keeping the interesting conversation going on, because we're about to hit $11,000. Thanks to everybody who is donating. I'll just read a couple of the comments. Ronnie, 4 minutes ago, $100. Been a staunch follower since 2019. Thanks for all the hard work, Ryan. Anonymous, 1,028. May you go in his grace. Brandon, $50. Cody Reed, $1,000. Thank you so much, brother. He says, much appreciation for my family. We truly value your hard work and the extension that is the Independent Media Alliance. I specialize in web development, content management. If I could be of any assistance, reach out. Devin Wolf, $20. Brad Reed, 400, and on and on and on. Thanks to everybody who is giving. Just as far as the gifts that we're giving away, there is still the donation of $150 to get the survival kit from Ryan. We've already given away all the seed packs from Ryan, all of my signed books, Zoe's books as well, TLAV stickers, those have been collected. One person donated with $1,000, so they get one-on-one with Ryan if they'd like, and discuss whatever you want. There's a signed TLAV microphone for $500 if somebody wants to collect that gift. We're just throwing out prizes just to kind of sweeten the deal. Overall, though, the whole idea, guys, is if you support what myself and Ryan are doing with Conscious Resistance and Last American Vagabond, breaking important stories and trying to do real independent investigative journalism, we really need your support, and it means a lot right now. So thank you to everybody who has given. Again, even if you can give $5, $10, $15, that goes a long way. So thank you guys for being here with that. Yeah, I mean, what Greg was talking about is really the path that I'm personally on. And one thing I will say before I kind of describe what I call exit and build, I fully accept that we all have, just like we all have different interests as journalists, right? We're not all drawn to the same topics, and that's okay. Despite what the audience says when people plead with you, why don't you talk about this particular topic? You're a shill because you don't talk about my favorite topic. We all have different interests, and those are going to, lead us to what we want to investigate. So that, that's one of the ways that we are diverse. And I also know that we have diverse lifestyles and interests and goals. So maybe not everybody has an interest in what Greg was describing, going off and getting land and growing food or building your own home or being a permaculturist or even just living outside of the country. Some of us love the city. I love the city for a lot of reasons. But ultimately, I do think that what COVID, at least for me, was a sign that life, as many people have accepted it or believed it would be, and the life that people admittedly built for themselves, investing in their careers and 401ks and banks and all this sort of stuff, that all of that is going away. I mean, I think we all realize that. And I think there's a lot of people who are still trying to hold on to that. And so they they might be awake, but they're staying in the city, and they think that somehow they're going to survive the smart cities and the technocracy and the digital IDs and biometrics and everything. Or people think that they can just continue to go about their regular lives in all these different ways, and including travel. I mean, I love to travel. I know a lot of us here obviously love to travel, but if we're paying attention and we're going to stand by, like if our voices actually mean something and the things we say actually mean something, then you're not going to just say, okay, I've been warning about biometrics and digital ID for a decade, but here it is, and I'm going to do it anyways because it's convenient and because I don't have another plan. What would be the point of talking about these things if you're just going to do them in the end? So if you're not going to submit, then you have to start asking yourself, what am I going to be able to do to survive and thrive into the future? If I'm not going to play the digital ID game, if I'm not going to play the biometrics to travel, if I'm not going to play in these systems or the biometrics to bank or whatever it may be, then how are you going to make money? Where are you going to put that money? How are you going to get your food? These are big questions that I started really asking myself a decade ago, but especially when COVID hit. I wrote my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, at the end of 2019, published it January 31st, 2020, right as we learned this word COVID-19. And it had nothing to do with pandemics or anything, but it was just talking about the rise of technocracy and how does a person who values privacy and liberty stay free in that world of this technocratic surveillance police state. And to me, the answer is, well, besides pushing back where we can and hoping and praying that that's going to stop it, which I'll be real, I mean, I'm not black-pilled about it, but I don't see a lot of resistance. So I started thinking, if we can't stop it, let's keep trying where we can. But if we can't stop it, then we should be able to survive it, thrive, in the face of it, outside of those systems. And so a lot of what I do talk about focuses on building parallel systems. I call it exit and build. So exiting from the systems that are not aligned with your values and principles and building the new ones or supporting those who are building new ones. And that could be technological, food production, food distribution. It could be healthcare. I mean, just anything that you think that we need to survive. We need the brightest minds among us who are awake to these issues, I believe, to be thinking about what are we going to do outside their systems. And of course, there's all kinds of people who say, Derrick, have you ever heard of Waco? They're not going to let you live outside the systems. They're just going to drone bomb you. They're just going to do this and that. And sure, all those things could and maybe will someday happen. But all I know is that in the past years that I've not only been talking about it, but actually living it, I now have land in Mexico with a community of 7 other households. We're aiming for 10 households. We've got avocado trees, banana trees. We're starting to build our homes in the next couple months. We're starting to host our first events to teach other people how to do this. And I'm, as you guys can obviously tell, I'm doing a fundraiser. I don't have a trust fund or a lot of money to do this. I used my own mind to, come together and build it with a group. And it took 5 or 6 years. But now we're at that point from first coming and deciding to move to Mexico, March 2020, right as the COVID began, seeing this land in May 2020, and then getting a group together, spending years coming together with like, how do I make this idea happen? How do we resolve conflicts? How do we organize ourselves? How do we make decisions? And working on building this with the group to now get to the point where we have the land, we own it, we're starting to build on it, all this sort of stuff. So my point is, it's possible. That's mainly what I advocate, outside of my journalism, because for me, my goal is to use the journalism to get people to think and question, to wake up. But then ultimately, I do try to lead them to some of my work that's more philosophical or strategic, of exit and build and the people's reset. And like, I don't think government's going to save us. And I don't think that there's really any other way I don't think there's enough people resisting, even those who are awake, to actually stop what's coming. So instead, I figure like, well, we should probably be able to survive it. And the way you do that is to not be dependent on their systems. So sorry about the long rant, but I'd love to get everybody's opinions, thoughts, criticisms.
Well, really quickly, I'd like to throw to ATN on this only because, I went to your event in Sedona with Derrick as well, and it really did change my entire perspective. I mean, I was already very much open to a lot of these topics, but to immerse yourself in that community myself with your, it was powerful, and I really do think that, you would have a good point to make on top of this, because it's really, your entire mindset is about building outside of the government. And so I'd like to throw it to you, brother, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, it's funny because I thought you were kind of setting me up for the network cities because of the work that I did about Prospera. And so maybe I could cover, Prospera, because I know there's, I look at that as an example of someone that is creating a free private city where they're offering governance as a service. I know that there's a lot of, people believe that Peter Thiel is behind it. I can assure you Peter Thiel is not behind it. Pronimos, which is a fund run by Friedman's son, I forget his name, Petrie Friedman, has a very tiny investment, less than 1% of invested capital in Prospera. But for those that don't know it, it's the idea that you can, not every free private city is something that necessarily is going to be a technocratic, like rug pull. There are people that are libertarians that want to offer, governance as a service, and they want to do it better in a kind of way that people can opt out. They can opt out of their existing government. They can vote with their feet. And in the case of Prospera, you've got a community that is got the lowest tax rate on the planet. I think it's like 5%, there's like a 5% income tax. There's a 2.5%, sales tax. There's a 1% on business activity tax. It has, it's got the, unbelievably, kind of the best regulatory environment to start a business in. You don't have this, they're using essentially insurance as regulations. So instead of having to go and get a building permit, you've got to go to your insurance company. The insurance company's got to insure it, but you can start building immediately. You don't have to have you don't necessarily have to have a health, inspector come by to check out your restaurant, but your insurance company's got to come by and check out your restaurant. So they're using kind of insurance as regulation. And they're offering, very, very, free. Peter Thiel has never uttered the word Prospera, as far as I know. And so I know there's that there's this rumor out there that he's behind it, but I think
not really, brother. I mean, we got to be, I think what's important to frame this as is that it's not fair to say that this is absolutely one thing or the other. There's a ton of people involved. There's a ton of different perspectives. But it's important to be clear about the fact, and I wish Ian Davis was here as well, because he's written a book and really gone into some of this. It's obvious that I think I said pronomos, but that's pronunciation. How did you pronounce it?
I think it's pronomos.
But so this is Andreessen, this is Thiel. Now, regardless of what we stated, it's clear that this is their entity, and it's clear that they're the face of a lot other than Prospera that funds the same things, like Praxia, which is aimed at Greenland. Peter Thiel's the one that asked to make that. From Trump to asking Trump to make that a network state. So what's important is they are 100% involved. And it's clear that their ideology and their influence is guiding all of this. The seasteading thing just started back up. It's all part of the same conversation. They're also the funding mechanism behind the Freedom City push. There's all these points to be made about how even if there's a lot of good people with the right, like Friedman, for example, might think that I disagree with the framing, but I could be wrong. But he might think he's doing the right thing for the right reasons. My point is that there are nefarious elements to this that are transparent. The way that this started with Honduras was an illegal U.S. regime change. I think that's a terribly bad. That's not libertarian in my mind, and how this went down. The way that they manipulated the government. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to just add to this because, I want two things. I want us to not get too deep into this because we have an Independent Media Alliance panel where we're going to have this exact conversation with our friend Sterling Lujan, who's also been involved in the network state, specifically by going to Balaji's, the author of the network state book, one of his network state camps, who has some opinions he wants to share on that. So I don't want us to get too far deep into that, but I did want to just reiterate what you were saying, that Thiel provided $9 million of round of funding in 2019. Now, I don't know, Etienne's told me about this as well. Like his involvement is not beyond that. But I do think the point you're making there, Ryan, to me is something that I care about, which is that these ideas of what I'm talking about, exit and build, a lot of people, there is an overlap between the network state of this idea of like, well, let's build our own systems, parallel systems. But it's also true, as you said, and as we've reported in the past, that these counter elite, as they call themselves, as Andreessen has called themselves, they absolutely see themselves as an alternative to the progressives, although they're heading in the same direction. And they are funding these so-called libertarian projects. And Peter Thiel is the furthest thing from a libertarian because of not only government contracts, government subsidies, things like that, military industrial complex. But I think that's also been, from my mind, a part of the corruption of that movement, by trying to get people who are, those who are talking about things similar to what I'm talking about. Now the billionaires are going to get their money involved and try to steer their own kind of version of it. Doesn't mean everybody involved is bad or necessarily, but I do think that they are trying to co-opt and steer their own version of
I'm
describing.
well, that's pretty much where I was going to go with that. So if I could just finish really quickly, my point was that the basis of it matters, right? And if it started in something like, who knows, maybe Peter Thiel thinks he's saving the world. Like we said at the beginning, it's hard to say. I'm not going to speak to intent, but I think it really matters that we can see the transition, right? And this is what I'm talking about, is that like we're seeing with this entire Trump administration, is that it's about presenting something like rending the Fed, but bringing in a CBDC, right? And so I see this as they recognize a floundering of their influence, they being just power structures, the government, and recognizing clearly that the importance in this is to try to get us to choose that new path. And so in this way, they know that we're fighting for these things. And so the idea that I see is to present us with what appears to be an enticing change, which is really just them co-opting our desire for that change and bringing in what I see as, a technocratic hellscape. I mean, you can look at the way that they've been seizing, areas like Crawfish Rock. I mean, it's expanding. The point is, it's not to be debated. We can debate if we want, but the point is there's different opinions on this. I just want people to ask whether or not it's possible this is leading you down a path that will be, the rug pull at the end. That's all. I think it's very important to ask.
So I've been to Crawfish Rock. I've interviewed many people from Crawfish Rock. They didn't seize anything. They offered to buy it. And then there was a pushback from the community that they didn't like it, but they have not seized any part of Crawfish Rock. There's, like I said, there's a lot of things that we can talk. But what really, just to get back to the point, is the point I was trying to make is, number one, not all free private cities are necessarily going to be a bad thing. I think there are going to be libertarian entrepreneurs that are going to want to offer governance as a service and do a better job than the government. And people are going to vote with their feet, and they're going to go there and they're going to have a better experience. They're going to have a better regulatory environment. They're going to have lower taxes. They're going to have better things. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing when you say free private city. The other point that I would make is that there's other places where people are voting with their feet. My other favorite is the Free State Project in New Hampshire, which does not have any, billionaire backing, but is slowly and surely taking over New Hampshire, rolling back rules, rolling back regulations, privatizing government, and is being incredibly successful. They have no state income tax. They have no state sales tax. They've engineered, there is a business proceed tax, but they went to the legislator and they got legislation passed where you can take your contribution to the business proceed tax and you can put it into the scholarship fund, where they're giving scholarships for private schools and even for homeschooling to get kids out of the government indoctrination center. And so that's another example where people are voting with their feet and they're going to better regulatory environments, lower tax places. And so I think that's another, point of of exit and build isn't necessarily to exit the whole thing. It's just to go where it's better, where you can build something with the other members of the Free State Project, where you can roll it back, where you can be effective, because there are so many people on the ground. There's over 10,000 plus activists on the ground in New Hampshire, and they're really making a difference. Now, I've got to pop out, but before I do, I want to sweeten the deal on the fundraiser. And so a lot of people don't know this, but the Art of Liberty Foundation, we sell more voluntarist books than anybody else. We sell more of Larkin Rose. The only outlet that sells more Larkin Rose than us is Amazon.com. And so we've got something called an everything bundle, and I want to offer one now to anybody that makes a $250 donation to the fundraiser. And what you're going to get is you're going to get a copy of my book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History. It's the best-selling book at 24 plus Liberty conferences and events. We've sold copies to 25 countries. This is actually a high-resolution hardcover edition. It's a special printing process. It makes the visualizations and the memes really pop. I'm going to give you a free copy of, you're going to get a copy of my new book, To See the Cages, To Leave It. Also, high resolution. I will sign it. I will personalize both to whoever makes the donation. And I will ship it to anybody in the United States for free. And I'll ship it any place internationally if you pay the postage. Also, a special process. We'll give you the brand new Liberator flash drive, 64 gig flash drive with a lot of stuff being censored off the internet, the best involuntarist thought, PDFs, where you're going to get What Anarchy Isn't, which is a little pamphlet by Larkin Rose. You're going to get The Most Dangerous Superstition. by Larkin Rose. You're going to get Anarchy Exposed, which is Larkin Rose and Shepard the Voluntarist, which is a police officer that left policing and then wrote an expose for other police officers about why voluntarism and anarchy is the way to go. You're going to get Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage by the Bad Quaker, a 3-part state, and you're going to get Three Friends Free, which is Voluntarism for Kids by Anam Pashanta. And so we call it an everything bundle. And the first person that donates $250 and specifically requests it, I will personalize it. And like I said, I'll send it, I'll cover the postage to any place in the United States. Internationally, if you pay for the additional postage. And again, I just wanted to thank Derrick and Ryan for everything that you guys do. We're there syndicating your work. We're trying to help. We're trying to put our shoulder against the door as well. Thank you to everybody else that participated. It was great to get to see so many old friends and get to make some new ones. And thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, brother. And that's very generous of you. Appreciate that. I'm sure they'll benefit greatly from all that work. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Well, I think we got another comment, right, brother? You want to add something?
Well, I'll go and say comment her, and then I want to bring in Indy News, who's been here.
All right, yeah, I'm gonna have to exit and build my lunch and do some podcasting stuff. I just wanted to add what you were saying was important. The psyops. I found I think another example recently where all of a sudden the algorithm pushed among alt media the tax revolt. Who doesn't want to pay taxes to the IRS? But it's kind of too obvious because you go back talking about the technative century. Robert Heinlein wrote in the 1940s that in a social credit economy, you don't need an income tax. So it's kind of like they're getting us always to buy into our advance this slavery. So I just wanted to throw that out. Greg, I'd love to have you on some point at Geopolitics and Empire. Do Siberia, especially if you don't have kids. I lived in Mongolia and Kazakhstan. I lived in a yurt in the Gobi in minus 30, minus 40 degrees.
Yeah.
I love it.
You want to talk about Siberia? I'll talk about Siberia. Yeah.
So that, and I guess on Mexico, Derrick, you know that I think I agree with your assessment that there's really no in between urban or rural. As you know, I've been banging on about 6 years, the algorithm ghetto, and it literally came to my house, to my home, my gated community. They installed biometric exit and entry. And I pushed back and I got a physical tag. So I don't have to submit yet. And they didn't get enough signatures to make the homeowners rule to do the digital apps. So I'm good for now. But yeah, there's really little choice there. And I'll throw in as well, you guys can decide, Ryan and Derrick, 3, because it's your 33 is your number, right, Derrick? I'll throw in 3 free Geopolitics and Empire Substack paid subscriber comps. And you guys can kind of decide where if you want to add that on. Just give me an email, the person who donates their email, and I'll add them for a year. And so and on Mexico, I think they will do eventually. Just going back to that point, they're going to approach every region differently. So they took out Maduro. They're going to pay off the Greenlanders because Europe is not the third world, right? We can't bomb the Europeans, but we can bomb the third world. And I think for Mexico, Scheinbaum is a globalist implementing digital biometrics, but they will probably just push Mexico to clean up the cartels, and maybe we'll see some strikes. And if I get kidnapped, well, it was nice knowing y'all. Yeah, nothing else to say. Keep up the great work, guys, and send these folks money. So.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Somebody's probably already cutting up the clip where he said 33 is my favorite number.
Yeah, right.
33, I'll tell you, 33 is my favorite number. I got to jump off 2 really quick, but 33 is a great number. It's 1/3. I use it in editing all the time. It's actually the Jesus number. I can't remember his name. Decoding Your Reality. I hired him to do my thing, and 33 and 7 was my number. Be proud of 33.
We're all Freemasons now.
Yeah. But I just wanted to say on that note, I guess, is that, when I first started doing this, I guess the idea was to convince people that all the government is like a private thing, like a company. You look at it as a corporation, and they're offering you a habitat. Just like the gentleman was talking about these cities being built. They were offering you that. They were offering you the civilization. That's what, But if you look at history, it's always like, the cost is you have to pay for it with your physical labor, to slave for it and stuff like that. If you accept that offer. But now that we live through COVID, I've realized that a lot of people know that. They know it, and whether they admit it or not, they know it, and they're like, yeah, and that's why we're here, because it's a good deal, And so many people are cool with that. It was shocking to me. I guess I was projecting. I was imagining that if people just knew that it was a fraud, that they'd be like, oh, fuck this, but it doesn't matter. So what matters is that we choose. So far, someone was just talking about taxes. I've chosen to never file income tax, and they never bother me. And in fact, I was married twice, and my second wife filed for me. I told her, don't, and she did it anyways. And they went after her, but they don't ever call me. They don't ever email me. They don't ever bother with me because I never made a deal with them. And at the time, I just thought it's because I don't trust the government. I'm like, well, fuck the government. And I thought I was irresponsible. I thought I was just like an irresponsible, stupid musician, but I was cool with that. As I've gotten older, I'm like, God, thank God I did that. But that's really what it is. We choose, they offer it to us. So far, we might get ICE with guns in our faces, but we're getting close. But so far, it's not like that. So far, they say, hey, would you like to do this? And we say yes. And I think they're going to do that all the way through the end. And the flip side to that is you can opt out. And this is so solid, in my opinion, from my observation. I think it's almost like a rule that has to be abided by in this place. I don't know. That is, you can trick people all you want. That's the free market, really. The free market is, everyone here is basically selling their opinions and their ideas and their beliefs. And some people are making a living doing it. And we can choose the people that we want to listen to. And if you want to choose, for example, Derrick and Ryan, if you appreciate their work and you want to choose their work, then the most solid way to get their work is to help them, in any way that you can, to give back so that there is this reciprocal spiritual relationship. Because really, I think, in my opinion, that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in trying to manage the earth. I'll leave that up to these Yahoo clowns. Have fun. That doesn't sound like fun to me. I'm here to try to grow and try to evolve and try to hopefully accomplish the things that my creator wanted me to accomplish in this lifetime. I want to get at least a passing grade in that sense. And so to me, the external world is just a matter of trying to manage my life so that I can always be able to follow my heart. That's the most important thing, in my opinion, is that we're all free enough to be able to follow our heart. And like I said, right when I jumped on the call, we still have this opportunity where we can freely talk and stuff like that. And hopefully we'll always have this. But for now, I wish everyone all the best. And I hope that everyone listening, if you haven't already, give to Derrick and Ryan. And thank you, Derrick and Ryan, for thinking of me.
Thank you, brother.
I was actually trying to think of, people are giving stuff away, and I'm like, I was starting to feel like on the spot. Like, what can I'm looking around, like, what do I have? And I really don't have anything other than my junk. So
there's got to be an old Greg Reese microphone you're not using. Right. Somebody would love to have.
I do. Now that you mention it, all right. I brought it up for a reason, I guess. I have a microphone that is sitting in a drawer. I bought it in Russia. I bought it in a Moscow music store, which I think makes it kind of cool. But I have other things I bought there, so I'm fine with parting with it. It is a good mic. I got it I did a man on the street in Russia, and I normally don't do that. And I thought it was great. And the man on the street, I talked to a bunch of people. I had a translator with me because I don't speak the language. I talked to a bunch of people, young, old, men, women, and they all basically had the exact same answer. I asked them, if you could talk to Americans, what would you say? And they all said the same thing in their own way. They all said, why don't you understand how important family is? Why don't you understand how important it is to reproduce and have children and to look after your family and to form like communities around family and family. And I don't have a family of my own, but I grew up in a very safe family, which is a very rare, extraordinary gift to have on planet Earth, is to grow up in a safe family. And in my opinion, it felt safe. And it was, and the love of my mother, a blessing. I mean, so many great things. To me, these are the most important things that a human could ask for, is family. And so anyways, blah, blah, blah. So that's everyone's answer. And one of the reasons that's the reason I love Russia is the people. The people, I think and this is based on several Russians I've talked to, because I asked a lot of Russians. I said, why is it that you guys are so like united and cool and instead of fighting each other? Because I came there from America, where I was just so tired to see like half of America hating on the other half of America, stupid, retarded stuff. And their answer was always the same. Their answer was like, well, we learned, back, usually the story is the Holodomor. Usually the story is, well, tens of millions of Russians were killed by their government, and we learned, and sad to say, I think, well, they say 17 million were killed by the shot, and we haven't learned yet. So we'll see. But anyways, that's with the microphone. The story of the microphone is I got it to do a man on the street, and I think I've only used it once. I don't think I've ever used it again. I used it that one time.
All right.
I needed something I could hold up like this and be like, I'm a reporter.
Right. So
I'm sure somebody would love that, dude.
But yeah, if anyone, I mean, what should I do? What's the deal? I don't know what I'm doing. I guess I ship that to someone who gives a certain.
We'll get in touch with you. We'll figure it out. But Ryan's giving away one of his mics, signed microphone, to the person who donates 500.
I'll
so
sign it. Yeah,
if you want to sign it, maybe we'll do something similar. And just if whoever donates, do put in a request. I'll just mention we're about to hit 12,000. Anonymous, 250. Thank you for all your hard work. I love the volunteers package. Scott Starr, old friend from 9/11 Truth Days back in New York, just gave 200. You are both excellent in all that you do. Lots of good comments. So thank you, everybody who's supporting. Thank you, Greg, for contributing too.
And you get Greg's Russian microphone. What a fantastic benefit.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate
it. No, it's seriously, that mic's got some love on it, man. It really does. It's got the love of dozens of Russians talking to America, and it's got my love for Russia on it. So yeah.
Awesome.
Ryan, you wanted to introduce Indy before we go to the next topic?
Well, yeah, Greg, you're saying bye. So thanks for joining, brother. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Indy, jump on in, brother. Let us know. Just introduce yourself. Talk about your work.
Oh, sure. Again, thank you so much just for the invite, and honored to be able to be on this panel. I've been watching and in the chat, and that's really how I started out. I was a fan kind of in 2020, and the mold everything broke for me. Believing in the system and in the duopoly, and then all of a sudden realizing, holy crap, they're not there for us, and they're there for all them. And who was there? Independent media was there. I started amplifying independent media, and that's what I started doing. And our paths kind of crossed in that way because of the topics that we were looking at, the things that we were questioning. And I started building aggregator sites. And now we have IndieNewsNow.com, and it aggregates basically everybody's content here on top of about 100 others. And I'm dedicated to making sure that we exit and build from the platforms. Okay, my cause is to exit and build and make sure that we separate our money from the platforms, and that the YouTubes and the Rumbles that have their hands in our pockets and are taking a massive percentage. I love the people that do support through those platforms, but if you could do it through the ones that don't take such a large percentage from the creators, as tough as it is for creators to make things work in this world, it really makes a massive difference. So that's one of the soapboxes that I've been on lately. I've been lucky and fortunate enough to be able to interview Matt Weinglass over at the Homeless Left, as well as Ryan and TLAV, and a couple other panelists here. And again, it's so important that we have uncorrupted, independent, ad-free voices that are telling the story and bringing their own perspective from across the world. I think it's so important to talk to people that are in the location. So for example, what's going on in Minnesota right now? We luckily have somebody in our extended family that lives in that area. So to get the story from somebody on the ground right now versus listening to how they're spinning it out in corporate media is so valuable. And corporate media doesn't necessarily want to listen to that, but independent media does. And that's why I think it's so important to support channels like Last American Vagabond that has been there breaking through the wall for more than a decade, that's been sued because of what they're saying, that's been censored, that's been shadow banned. And that happens to all of us, but it really happened to these guys first, to Corbett, that was deplatformed. And, you know, Derrick talked earlier about some of the other channels that aren't here anymore, unfortunately. How Charlie was able to rebirth the Activist Post, which had been kind of defunct for a while, and bring that back. And let's reclaim some of those names and reclaim some of those properties that had such value then. And I see what's happening to Zoe, and I feel awful, and I wish I could do even more to help her. She's being debanked, and she's unable to publish, and she talked about some of her struggles earlier, and I've been trying to help her with developers and websites and anything we can do to help get the word out there, and anything anybody can do, share, talk about what's going on out there, and talk about independent media and how just brainwashing corporate media is. I think that it's really important. And Ryan talks about the two-party, you know, the two-party illusion, the duopoly illusion. We've been anti-duopoly for years and really believe in it and try really hard not to cover their issues and on their timeline.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to say thank you for inviting us, for inviting me. Support independent media. Those are the properties. INN, Indie News Network, is what I started years ago. And thank you, Ryan, for showing the website. And thanks, Derrick, for all you're doing too.
I remember when you sent us the award and everything, you know, you're doing good work, man. So you keep it up. And I think that this is, you know, the growth of this, like you're talking about from how you started it, this is what it's all about, you know? So thank you. I really appreciate that. I want to introduce Dennis Kucinich, who has limited time today. So I'm really honored you joined us. Hey, brother. We've been doing a podcast called Fine Print on BitChute with Jeffrey Warnick and Bruce Fine, and just really come to greatly respect his work and his opinion. So thanks for joining.
Ryan, back at you, and thank you for the work that you and everyone who's on this call, involved in independent media, courageous to stand up for the truth of as we know it and what we see. The Last American Vagabond is to be celebrated for its role. And Ryan, I can't thank you enough for your willingness to speak out forthrightly and without equivocation at a time when we're being presented with alternative realities constantly and being asked to indulge and participate in them, and being told not to believe our own eyes and not to believe our ears. And this duality that is characteristic of our time, that's promoted by legacy media, has put people in a position that they just don't know what's going on and they don't know who to believe. But independent media gives them something to anchor their thinking in, and something that that is unvarnished. I'm glad to hear, as you know, about how you're relying on people on the ground, people who are where things are happening, to be able to get a report. And certainly Minnesota's in all of our minds. I just published a piece on the Kucinich report on Substack about it, and from the standpoint of the constitutional issues that are at stake. And that's the podcast that Ryan and I are involved in almost once a week about the deeper constitutional issues that we're facing in America. So it's great to join you and to say hi to everyone. And Ryan, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to say hello and to encourage everyone. This, you know, if we're going to save America, it's because of people who are on this call and people who have the intention to challenge the status quo and not take anything for granted. So thanks again.
Thank you, Dennis. It's an honor to have you here. I don't know how much time you have. If you want to stick around for a minute, if you have limited time, feel free to drop off whenever. But if you want to, talk about something, Minnesota, or anything else, anything
Ryan,
you want to get into?
I wanted to pull up something real quick, Ryan, for Dennis. Mr. Kucinich, it's good to see you again. We haven't seen each other in years. Ryan, I put a link in the chat. This is an interview just to kind of throw some memories back. I interviewed Dennis in Aspen, Colorado at the Nexus Earth Conference in 2017. And talking about Standing Rock at the time, talking about nuclear weapons, government corruption. There you go. The both of us looking a little younger there. So that was back in 2017. Just as an example of the length of time that I've been in the independent media, but also working with Ryan, and of course Mr. Kucinich, yourself being a voice of reason amongst insanity in the two-party system. So really appreciate you being here. And if you do have a minute to stick around, I was going to bring up another topic that I've reported exclusively on Last American Vagabond. And I'd love to get any comments here from anybody who wants to contribute. As I was saying earlier, the stories we've been covering, the UN whistleblower who just came to me the last couple of days, going to the fluoride trial. I was one of the only people there. Like, these are works, articles, and reports that I've done exclusively on the lastamericanvagabond.com because of the support of everybody who supports us financially. I also wanted to mention, Ryan, if you could pull up the Bethany Christian Services series. So in 2024, I had a couple of women reach out to me about this organization called Bethany Christian Services, which is an adoption agency. And I'd known a little bit about adoption agency and how that industry could be corrupted. I've researched, of course, human trafficking in other areas and foster homes and other arenas, but I hadn't looked into the adoption industry specifically. And these different women came to me and they started to share private communications. They started to share their whole history of being on different sides of the adoption story. One are young women who maybe get mixed up into drugs or have a bad home life and they end up having a baby at a young age. This whole industry is built up around them to essentially just swarm them, not inform them of their rights and tell them, like, look, if you don't want your baby, you can give it up to us. We'll take care of it. You can visit it every week. And they sell them this whole picture of an adoption that is, they're going to be connected to the baby. They're going to watch it grow up from a distance and things like that. And the short version is basically it's all lies. And this entire industry, there's so many companies, Bethany Christian Services is just one of them, that these mothers and these parents reached out to me and started to share their adoption records and their history and showing communications with the adopted parents. And of course, the children are often very traumatized from the whole experience. My point here is that this is just another type of story that the Last American Vagabond that I've written exclusively through this, because people trust us, because people reach out and say, I want you to help me bring this story to the light. I don't know anybody else in the independent media who will give this the time or the credit it deserves. And it ends up becoming this series of articles investigating this industry. This is just one example of that. But I'm curious if anybody here, or Dennis, even in your role within the political system, if you'd ever come across anything relating to the adoption industry and any sort of efforts to try to, I guess, make it more accountable and more responsible to these parents.
I've come across issues that relate to trafficking, and God knows the potential for what you just described being involved in something like that. But thank you for exposing it. I wish I could stay on this entire call, but I can't. I love to speak to each and every one of you. Ryan, feel free to give my contact information out to anybody who's on this call. And I look forward to working with you, every one of you, on the things that you care about and on the things that the country cares about as well. So, Ryan, thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to being part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Talk to you soon. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on the adoption industry? If not, I was going to go to one more extreme of some of the stories we reported on, which I think could be a potential. I know Desi has issues. She wanted to talk about Greg's comment earlier. I know you had some wherever you want to take it. Anybody, feel free to jump in.
Well, I want to tackle that adoption angle first quickly, because the trafficking and the adoption centers, they definitely go hand in hand. There's currently, like as we're speaking, people are looking into a very similar one to the Bethany one with TPUSA and Liberty University that has had very similar reports from the women of coercion and all sorts of horrible things of their babies. But from my knowledge of it, which I do particularly take an interest in what happens to children. So the adoption scandals, the biggest one that I've looked into at all, and it concerns the United States, just so happens to include Guatemala, was the 80s and 90s, which was like that's my era. I was born in 91. So they had, I think, 30,000 stolen children from these adoption agencies that were set up essentially with the help of USAID back in Guatemala to funnel 30,000 children that, the parents were told the baby died or they didn't make it, or it was a legitimate adoption. And there's just now been a large wave in the last few years here in the United States of people that came from that system that have been able to retrace their families. And it's been enlightening, and I think it's really opening the door for people to investigate these kind of things, because for a long time, adoptions was kind of off the seat. Now we have digitalization and everything, it's much more easy to track these things down. But it's one thing I've noticed is just it's clear that it's still a massive trafficking operation by and large. It doesn't matter if it's a Christian center or Catholic center. They seem to all have this kind of underlying agenda.
Yeah, just one other point on that real quick. Sorry, right. I want to just stress this comment because this is something I heard a lot when I was writing the story. It's over on YouTube on one of our channels. And again, not to get derailed into a whole debate where we probably don't all agree on it, but the comment is, but adoption is always better than abortion, isn't it? And I know some people would say yes, but I can also say that just based on not my personal opinion, but some of the sources I spoke to, some of the women, even though they were not very pro-abortion, felt like it maybe have been better if they had, if they had an abortion because their child's life ended up so traumatized because of the lies they were sold by the adoption industry. And that's the whole thing, is there is this entire veneer around it that people, that most of us have been sold growing up, and there's people who are wealthy. Sometimes these are wealthy, light-skinned white folk who go into some foreign country and they're sold one story and it literally is trafficking. There is actually a huge scandal unfolding in Korea that I kind of touched on in my investigation, where South Korea just had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I think, all about the adoption industry, because post the Korean War, there was a shitload of Korean adoptees, kids who were abandoned, their parents had been killed. And that created this massive industry of adoption where, kids came to America, Canada, et cetera. And many of them now have learned that basically their families are still alive, or that they were kidnapped, or just all these kind of messed up circumstances. So it's not this pretty picture that people have been sold that, a baby's going to be left on the street or it's going to be aborted, so the adoption home is always going to be the better option. There's many, many examples where I think it'd be hard to argue that that's a better option. And again, not to get into an abortion debate, but I just wanted to address that comment.
Well, it's a very personal thing. Everyone's got different opinions, but the point to be made is that clearly, if you look at the very real, provable parts of the darkest side of that story, it goes, there's death involved as well. There's a point to be made about where that really can go. And it's a horrifying conversation. But what I want to point out is interesting is around these groups. And first and foremost, it's important to consider, especially from the government perspective, that there is involvement. And there's been many provable cases of people in these companies or in the government, in child protective services, being involved in this horrible, in trafficking. That's a provable reality. That's not to say that it's every time or all of, any or every company. So I think it's worth considering as well that, these people gravitate towards these positions. It doesn't have to immediately mean the company itself or the people who own it, or, we should consider those, but it's always important to be objective and just recognize the crime where we can prove it, and in some cases it goes beyond that. And I think I remember seeing reports, this goes a long way from within, I'm speaking from the California perspective, I believe, because I think there's different names in different states, child protective services within California, but that they were something like, I forget, I don't want to quote the wrong percentage, but a very high percentage of people that are kids that would go through this process would end up in some form of trafficking. And that was coming from their reports. They're not claiming responsibility or saying we did that, but simply saying through this process, dishonest parents or other companies will come in and manipulate. And that's just the core. Then you get into whether there's a more coordinated, darker Epstein type story in there. And we know these things exist. So this is such important work. And it's like you were talking about earlier, or rather I think it was Greg, I forget who pointed it out, but being willing to say the hard thing in the moment where it's hardest is what we're all here for, and that's what most people shy away from, is waiting for it to be sort of acknowledged to then come out and break the story. But it's about saying the hard thing when it's hard, not when it's easy, so shout out to you, Derrick.
I'd love to get Matt or anybody else's opinions. Just, I know Destiny had more to add, but just on the adoption industry, if any of you guys have thoughts on that.
Jump in anytime, guys.
I'll just say this is obviously something that, as Ryan pointed out, it's factual, it's provable. We see it. We can have this ideological discussion about abortion separately, although it's not separate, but it's important to recognize the difference between factual assessment and then where we come from ideologically. And I do think that when the information is available to people, they need to be able to reassess their stance. And it doesn't mean it takes away from your ideology. It's just that we need to be a little more aware of options in this arena. And I think it does come back to, and again, I don't mean to jump over to ideology, but there is something about applying principle to giving all options to mothers, to families, to to husbands and wives, to everybody, that they have every option to work with, and then they can assess these circumstances when they're making these hard choices. And that's why I think being consistent with that principle is something to point out. And I also would say this: when you get caught in an ideological debate with somebody who is trying to apply some other ideology of religion and try to say, hey, we have to say no to abortion all around, no matter what, then you look at the landscape from that point of view, and you see that you don't see anybody in that arena championing improving societal conditions, improving the ability to elevate families who are struggling. You don't see consistency with their war agendas, and that it's okay that kids are getting murdered and destroyed and blown up in Palestine, but but we care about lives no matter what, innocent lives of children. So I just think those are things to always think about when you get caught into these debates. And I'm not saying this isn't the place to have that particular debate, but just to be aware of that. So we should always want to have this information, and we should always be open to critical thinking when we see the child sex trafficking, this idea that the CPS is involved with this. This should alarm everyone. It doesn't matter what church you belong to or where your starting point is. You should be alarmed about this, and you should want to have this information and get it out to people in an honest way.
Yeah. Yes, sir. We'll turn it to Tim real quick after this, but welcome Carrie Wedler to the show. Honored to have you here. Thanks for joining, Carrie.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim, if you want to jump in with comments on that. It looked like you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, what I heard about Guatemala, and it just made me think of something of a contract that I saw for social media influencers in the region. The U.S. Government, the embassy in Guatemala, they put out a program or a contract called Influencer Rapid Response. It's not to do with the with abortion and things like that, but it made me think of like what kind of influences are going on. So whatever kind of social media campaigns, what kind of societal social engineering they're doing. And there's this one thing from just September of last year. They wanted to identify and recruit local content producers and TikTok, bloggers, media personalities to align with U.S. interests and provide training and resources to counter narratives. This was about smuggling and transnational criminal organization, or malign actors, as they call them. So when I heard about Guatemala and things, and it just made me think about the kind of influence campaigns that are going on, and that a lot of people on social media, influencers, a lot of them are getting paid, and a lot of them are getting paid through the governments, and not just ours, like from all over the world. But I just wanted to add in with that. Yeah.
I think it's my opinion entirely, but whether it's bots or that, I think that's most of what's happening today. And I don't mean to say that's people that don't even realize that they're compromised or don't realize what's driving them or what's nudging them. And it's just, that's, you got a lot of these newer creators that pop up that, that are out of nowhere. And I don't think all of them are like fully aware that they're being used. It's a really weird dynamic, but we should, not that alleviates them from responsibility, but it's the $7,000 Israel point. You're right. It's everywhere. Our government, what you just said, to align with U.S. interests. So it's like, we're paying you to make sure you say these things, but then not framing it as we're controlling what you have to say. It's like Rubio saying, we're not controlling Venezuela. We're just controlling their policy. It's like, the people are just
Ryan, we don't need $7,000 checks because we've raised $12,500 from I think more than 100 people now at this point who are supporting TLAV and the conscious resistance. Just want to shout out a couple people real quick before we get to some more topics here. Anonymous, $100, love you guys, and gave us a video about wisdom for our gardens. Cody Reed says he wants to meet with you, Ryan. Laura Hetrick, $50, thanks for all the work you guys do. Lisa, thank you for all your work and staying with it despite all they throw at you. Joseph Zinner, that's a friend from back in Houston. What's up, brother? Keep up the great work. Excellent work. So lots of good comments coming in. Again, thank you to everybody who has been contributing to this TLAV and Conscious Resistance fundraiser. We're almost 3 hours in, and I think it's about 6 a.m. in Japan. So James Corbett might be showing up at some point soon to join us. So we'll be happy for that. I did want to bring up just another example of the type of investigations, the type of things that I've been able to do working with Ryan over the last 5.5 years and get opinions from everybody here, because I think we'll have, again, diverse thoughts on this. As I mentioned with the last story, so the adoption story, that started with mothers reaching out to me and saying, here's my story, here's what I've dealt with, this is Bethany Christian Services, handing me paperwork, proving to me what they were claiming. Another story that started in this way, it was kind of related to a bigger investigation that I did. So I'm going to mention one of them, and then we'll talk about the one that led to people sending Ryan and I VHS tapes of things that they had recorded on TV in like the 80s and 90s, and basically wanting us to report on it. So one of them was that in 2022, the Utah Sheriff's Department, they announced an investigation into what they called, this is not our words, ritualized child sex abuse. And that obviously was like a headline that it actually didn't make many headlines. It was reported in Utah. I actually heard about it from Jason Burmis, who was here earlier. And Burmis sort of did an initial report on it and then kind of moved on. And I started to look into it, and I realized this was more than just, it's going to deserve more than just one video and be done with it. And I won't get into the whole thing here because I've written probably a dozen articles on it now over the last 13 years. Short version. This man named David Hamblin, a therapist, was accused in numerous court documents by more than a dozen alleged victims. And I say alleged because it never went to court, unfortunately, including his own daughters, of abusing him as part of a cult in Utah that involved people who were all part of the Mormon Church in Utah, which is a very powerful political and obviously religious force in that state and around the United States. And so this case had come back up out of nowhere, 2022. The Utah sheriff said they got enough evidence to announce the investigation and then to arrest David Hamblin. And unfortunately, over 2 years of back and forth, all charges were dismissed and a bunch of tomfoolery happened. I detail it in all these articles. So when I started to report on that, though, a lot of people in Utah reached out to me and said, hey, I'm Mormon, I'm involved in the church, or I saw this. And it turned into a whole series of articles. Ryan, the one I'm thinking about is called The Mormon Church and Child Sexual Abuse. It was like the fourth or fifth one because, as I said, it started with this investigation about David Hamblin. Then I started to investigate that the fact that Utah is probably, besides maybe Florida, one of the states that has the most wild and extensive history of child abuse and sex cults and things like that. And a lot of it does relate to the Mormon Church. We won't have time here to get into all of it, but I definitely encourage people to check that out because this is just another area when you start to look into it, heavily documented. And so as I'm reporting this, I'm getting information sent to me from all kinds of people, Mormons, ex-Mormons, about the things that they witnessed. And it starts to get into this area of research that many of us hear about, but claims of Satanism. And even in the case of David Hamblin, some of the young girls who wrote, I mean, I'm talking about 300-page victim statements, not like, oh, he took me to his house and abused me one time, but detailed statements of the names and the people and where they lived and which houses they took them to. And some of these police reports, some of these witness statements, in their own words, say that they were raped while the men were doing a prayer to Lucifer. They were raped while they took off the skin of a dead person and wore it while they were doing the raping. Like very, very disturbing, detailed stuff. And so this led to an investigation that we called Justice Delayed, which was an investigation into the head of the Mormon Church, or the former head of the Mormon Church, Gordon B. Hinckley, and one of his officials in the church, a man named Walton Hunter. Actually, his daughter reached out to me, and she became the source for this 3-part investigation that we did. And I think we were able to conclusively, provide, at least I can't say prove because it's not a court of law, but provide more evidence and give his daughter, as well as some of the things that she claimed, and corroborate them. And her story of being abused by her own father and being abused by different people in the Mormon Church, and people who unfortunately are not here to, be held accountable. And so there's that angle, and I'd love any thoughts on that. But then the other one I wanted to bring up, the last one, Ryan, which was what I mentioned about the tape. So in the Justice Delayed investigation with Walton Hunter, that did involve tapes being sent to me. And there's this old documentary about the Mormon Church that only got played one time on TV or something, and it disappeared. And the only reason you can find it on the internet now is because somebody sent it to us in a VHS form. Brian digitized it, and then it turned into part of my article series. And so we started getting sent different tapes. And one of them was from this journalist in Oklahoma on NBC Channel 4. His name was Brad Edward, I believe. And he used to do a segment every week called, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up in front of me. I can't remember the name of the weekly segment, but this one week he called it, Are the Children Lying? And he does this whole report about
Your Corner.
Satanic abuse. Yeah, your corner. So he did like, the weekly kind of local news back when journalism was actually journalism on local news. This was in the 1980s. We don't know the exact date, but somebody sent us the tape. And so we were able to take that tape, put it on the internet for probably the first time ever, put that documentary of the Mormon church leader and the accusations. And I don't mean just random people making accusations. I mean, this is a very well done documentary from back in the 80s that it made waves when it first came out, but this was before the internet. So it hadn't really been brought into the internet age. And all of this is coming just from people trusting me, trusting Ryan, trusting our ability to communicate these stories. Being able to develop sources like that and try to give them a voice is what really drives me to do independent media. So I just wanted to share that, and I'd love comments on any of those topics. If you guys have veered off into the claims of Satanism and things like that, or just ritual abuse on the broader sense, and also just, this is an example of the kind of independent work, the investigations we've done over the last 5.5 years based on things that people have sent to us directly.
Derrick, I have a question about this, because we were looking into some of this, the history of Mormonism, and trying to place this. I think it was Professor Jang that started off our interest in this on our show, and my colleague, co-host Jay Scott, he's been doing some excellent work on this, just trying to get to the bottom of the origins of this. Seems to be in the realm of the Freemasons, and the idea that this setting up this new, I guess you can call this religion, this cult, whatever, in that particular time frame, late 1800s, which ended up primarily existing in the Utah area. We see this very similar, approach to this satanic worship and the focus on the bringing in the children. And it seems that this Freemason, I would say, launching point also is where we're seeing the Zionist launching point in the exact same time frame. Is that something that you have come across as far as the chronological order of how this has the roots of this thing? Are you seeing the same stuff as far as the Freemasons connection to Mormonism and the satanic elements going on here?
There's definitely a huge Freemason Mormon connection. And again, that's not, obviously all kinds of opinions on the Masons. I believe they're at least one piece of, not every single Mason, of course, just like not every single Jew and all that sort of thing. But absolutely, are there Masons who have been high level in the Masonry and then high level in politics and elsewhere and in religion? Absolutely. And Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, was a master Mason himself. And I just covered this like for a slight bit, but once you dive into this world, you find that there's actually a whole subculture on YouTube. For example, I want to shout out Relentless Hope. You can check out her channel. There's a whole subculture, and it's kind of in the true crime area of current and ex-Mormons who are deeply into this investigation, because a lot of people enter that religion and end up deeply traumatized or abused. That's what I was saying. Like, as soon as I started to report on it, just the amount of people who started to reach out and share their stories was really astounding. And so they have extensive research showing this. And yeah, there's a lot of rituals apparently within Mormonism that are identical to Mason rituals. And there's just a lot of overlap there, definitely since the beginning. And then also we both alluded to the fact that the Mormons are very powerful. And just as an example of that, Mormons are actually, there's a lot of people worried about Bill Gates buying up all the land. That is true. He was doing that, but the Mormons actually own the majority of the U.S. land that's not privately held, like as far as one institution goes. Also, in the case I was describing of therapist David Hamblin, in the police files, there's another accusation against a man named David Levitt, who at the time was the Utah County Attorney. He's since resigned, and now he's like renovating a castle in Scotland. And I think essentially he got away with human trafficking because he's accused in some really disturbing things that we cover in these reports. But his father was Dixie Levitt, who was the head of the Levitt Insurance Company. His brother, I can't remember his brother's name at the moment. There he is right there on the screen. His brother's the former governor of Utah. Like, the Levitt family, deeply connected to the Mormon church, deeply connected to Utah politics, and there's some mafia connections as well. I mean, the Mormons as a church are a huge player. I'm not saying they're the top of the pyramid or anything like that, but they're definitely more than just some weird kooky church that people might kind of deem them as. And so there are those Freemason connections and Zionist connections as well in there. It's a huge rabbit hole, man.
Yeah. We hope to be doing some more work on this, and I appreciate you providing this. We're gonna look more into that as well. So yeah, we appreciate.
I'll make one point about the comment you made about that, and I'll throw to Carrie. I want to make sure I give her some time here since she was the new addition to the conversation today. But the interesting point you make about Zionism, I mean, it's funny because right now, because it's clearly a central point, because there's clearly, like, I would argue the more than anywhere else propaganda around this to make you not look at how obvious the connection is, and not even to get into the whole topic about the misrepresentation, making it about racism and so on. But what's interesting is it might not be surprised to find out that there is a very clear connection. And here's just some of the random articles I've covered: Jewish Journal, Are Mormons Zionist? And you won't be surprised by the argument, or just this: the complicated relationship between Mormons and Jews, and the conversation that Latter-day Saints patterned themselves after biblical Israel. And what you'll find today is a very clear conversation from leading Zionist entities that Mormonism is a sister entity to what they're doing. Now, that's not to say anything other than there could be deeper connection within it. And my work has gone deeper into that if you want to get into it in the show and past conversations I've had. But what I find interesting is the history around it and how it is, you can go back to the reality of, and it's a horrible, there's movies made about it, about the way Mormons were slaughtering Christians, about the way Mormons were literally dressing up like Native Americans and slaughtering people and blaming it on Native Americans that were then slaughtered because of their actions. And that's not every Mormon. It's not every, but the point is important in the context of what we're discussing around what Zionism is doing and how this does tie in. And it's interesting that it doesn't get as much attention in the vein of what Derrick said about buying land. It's just worth considering that there is a bigger story there, and that at the very least, there are some connections, and anything, in my opinion, that Zionism is supporting is something we should look closer at. That's my personal opinion. But I'll throw to you, Carrie, for wherever you want to go or comments on that. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you guys?
Good.
Doing
Thanks
great.
for coming today.
I feel like I actually joined at a great time to express the sentiment that I want to share. So I came on when you guys started talking about satanic ritual abuse. It's like very heavy stuff. So what I just wanted to say in support of you guys is that if you're watching this, if you're paying attention to all this stuff, it's heavy. It is hard to be aware of these things. It is really hard to have a perspective outside the mainstream that's really digging into all of the horrific things that go on in this world. And I just want to commend both of you, because you have been doing this for so long with so much consistency. And I have been doing it for as long, but with not as much consistency because of the toll it takes on me. That's a big reason why I'm not as consistent as you guys. I do my best and I'm trying to, do more, but I am in awe of people like you who, despite the personal toll, despite a lot of the thanklessness, around the work you guys do, you still do it. And I see such a deep passion and drive and commitment and integrity in both of you. And it is not an easy thing to do, to keep your principles, to stay consistent, to be so dug into the trenches on this kind of work. So for everyone watching, I speak as someone who has been worn down by the heaviness of this world many times over, and I rest and I come back, but it's like you guys don't even need the rest. And I am so struck just by the amount of energy you put into this work, and you put your whole hearts and souls and minds into it. And I just want to really stress that, because it is not an easy thing to do. Again, if you're watching, you know how hard it is just to be aware of these things, to care about these things, but to make your entire life's purpose about it is so commendable. It's so impressive. And I cannot express enough how grateful I am for you guys, and just how much fortitude it really takes on so many levels to be able to do the work that you guys do for as long as you have. And I appreciate you.
Well, I can't express how much that means to me, Carrie. I mean, you've been, you're someone I've looked up to in the past to this very point, but when I first started, anti-media, we've mentioned that already on the show, and so you've been doing this longer than most people here. So just, that means the world to me. So thank you so much. And I really do hope, that you continue the work and that people tend to support your work, because it's outstanding. I mean, some of the stuff you put out, it kills me every time. It's like I play it at the beginning of my show every time I see one, because it's
Thank you.
good work.
Yeah, Karen, we were giving some anti-media love earlier, shouting out everybody to anti-media. And for those who don't know, Carrie was the editor at Anti-Media. So, been around a long time. And yeah, as Ryan was saying, your work it reaches people in totally different ways than either Ryan or I do. And that's also what's important about everybody who's popped in today, who's doing written investigations or podcasts or quick short clips, and remixing other people's articles, aggregating all the different ways that everybody are trying to reach people. So thank you for being here with us, Carrie.
Yeah. And since you mentioned anti-media, I want to mention that I worked with you there, Derrick, and it's been years since we got censored. I can say it freely. You were for sure my favorite writer to edit, because I could trust you. I knew that you were going to be really diligent about your sourcing. Right. You were easy. Just the written word, you were so clear. So again, more praise, because I really enjoyed working with you, and I really appreciate your commitment to real accuracy, not just pushing narratives, not just reporting what proves what you're trying to say, but really putting an emphasis on giving all the information to people so they can decide for themselves and they can think for themselves. And I think that's so key in the current age, and really always. But I just wanted to commend you again.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you.
I echo that entirely, Derrick. 100%. Well, Robert, welcome to the show, brother. Good to have you joining. You guys all know Robert, writer for the Last American Vagabond. How are you, brother?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Well, since you're here, shout out anything else you want, other work you do, anything else you just recently did, or just, wherever you want to go. What's on your mind?
No, I just wanted obviously to commend the work that you do and the platform that you've set up here. Of course, I work across a whole bunch of different media outlets, and I've always been able to bring precisely what I wanted to TLAV, and to actually communicate all of the authentic points of view that I have. You've never held me back once. It's been a pleasure working with you over the years. And I'm happy to be a part of this platform. So I suppose that's what's on my mind right now. We can go into anything you want to, though.
Thanks for being here, Robert. We haven't actually got to connect before, but I'm always seeing your work on TLAV as well. And you always do a great job of covering, geopolitics in the Middle East, Syria, Israel, of course. Thanks for all the time you put into those reports.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for your work as well. I know we haven't actually spoken before, but I've also seen your reports over the years. So it's
awesome,
an honor to be here.
Well, I'll tell you what, Robert, real quick, just on your work. It's this is what I love about what I do, is that I've got to reach out. I've got the opportunity to reach out to people like you and all of you here and be able to, absorb what I can from all the greatness out there here and the entire conversation today. And I'll tell you, Robert, your work and your insight on Palestine, on it, every connected topic that we've talked about, you've changed my perspective on so many things. You've evolved my perspective on so many things. Your work, in my opinion, is hands down the best on that topic out there. And that's not just because you write for us. I say the same when it's posted on Mid-Press News or anywhere else. So just shout out to you and that work in general. And I recommend people check it out, because some of the stuff that you put out about what is going to happen, same for Derrick, by the way, or Carrie, or, everyone here, the point of things you've covered have come to pass 6 months later, almost identically, not every time, but really well crafted points about what's likely to happen that end up happening identical to what you said, and as we all know, that rarely gets pointed to in the moment, which goes to the algorithmic point we talked about earlier. But just, I wanted to make sure people knew that and to make sure people check out your work. So.
No, that means a lot. Honestly, that means a lot. And, that's why we do it, to try and help shape everyone's point of view, even other people who, like yourself, who understand what's going on. We sort of help each other along as journalists, and bring new information to the table, so that we can all sort of make up our own minds about different topics. That's
awesome.
Very important.
Yeah, Brian, I want to just give a shout out. We're about to hit 13,000. We've at 12,688. We've got a few more donations that have been coming in as we've been discussing these details, and since Robert's joined. And look, it's up to 700 already since I said that. Cool. So we've been at it for 3 hours. I told you I would do this for 2 hours, and I can't believe we're already 3 hours in. So I'm going to go to the top of the hour. So another 45 minutes. Hopefully Corbett shows up here. But we do really thank everybody who has already given. We've already, I think, reached the giveaways of Ryan giving away seed packs and survival kits, the assigned microphone, one-on-one meetings. I think we gave it away already. The 5 people who donated $50 are going to get a copy of any of my books you want. So we will be in touch with everybody, but there's still opportunity for you guys to support. Again, we're doing this. We're bringing together all our friends and colleagues because Ryan wants to continue to do his daily breakdowns. He wants to continue to pay me to write articles. I want to continue to produce documentaries. And that's some of the things we want to do in 2026. I actually want to start making documentaries that would kind of be under a shared brand of The Last American Vagabond of the Conscious Resistance. If you've seen my previous documentary work or what I've been doing with the Pyramid of Power, you know the quality of not only the writing and the reporting, but the production that we're trying to bring to the table. So if you want to support us, guys, this is the time where we're really asking you for support to come out and help us make this happen. And I wanted to do a throwback, Ryan, if we could go back to the very first thing I ever did for TLAV 5.5 years ago, which I think was kind of cool because this is May 2020, right? COVID's going on. Ryan and I had been talking for a couple of months, and he asked me if I wanted to start writing and make it a regular gig. And I was, like many of us at that time, paying attention to Bill Gates and paying attention to, starting to ask the questions. COVID, this is May, so still kind of early. Some people weren't yet questioning things, but we were definitely early in asking what was going on and what was Bill Gates's role, and looking at Event 201 and all that different stuff. And between myself, Ryan, and James Corbett, and a few other outlets, we launched what we called Expose Bill Gates Day. Some of you might remember this. This was in like the summer 2020. We actually did a couple of these, and it was based largely on this three-part investigation that I did. First off, kind of looking at Gates's whole history of philanthropy, if you can call it that, and just some of the truths behind that, and how he hides money, and what he and sort of the history of philanthropy itself. Then we had a second piece. I can't remember that one. That was focused on COVID and his roles funding different COVID operations. And the third, probably the most controversial, looking at the health surveillance aspect, Event 201, looking up what was the other big incident, the Rockefeller one. Somebody will remember the name. The study that they did like 10 years before, lockdown or something like that. I can't remember. Lockstep. Yeah, that's what it was. And it's been a few years. And looking at all the ways that Bill Gates fit into this. And so that was the first three things I did for TLAV. I told Ryan, I was like, I got this idea for a super deep dive on Bill Gates. They're each 2,000 words plus. And then we sort of turned that into an Expose Bill Gates Day. And what was cool was actually, it wasn't a huge thing, but there was at least a dozen cities across the US that I'm sure if you go search Expose Bill Gates on Twitter or elsewhere, you'll find them. I know that where I was based at the time in Houston, there was a movement of people, and it was just going out, passing out information, asking people questions about, different things related to COVID, of course. And we had a fun time in Houston when people masked up and stay away from us. You guys are psychos and all this sort of fun stuff. But it was a cool, for me, beginning to have that opportunity. Because again, as a writer, and I think the writers who will understand this, especially in the independent media, you're rarely getting paid by the amount of words you write. Sometimes as a writer, you might get offered pay. That's not usually the case in the independent media. My first writing gig back in 2012 was $20 an article, whether it was 500 words or 10,000 words, right? And over time, I've seen that go up and down and up and down. But that's not really what matters. When you feel like you have something to share, an idea, an investigation, you're going to write it until you feel like it's done. And that might be a 3-part, 10,000 word essay that only a handful of people are going to read, but it felt important. And I think it was important. It was part of that overall kind of zeitgeist of people questioning Bill Gates at that time. And it was really cool to see that it did branch out to some people hitting the streets with signs about Bill Gates. And it wasn't just about this one person, of course. It was more about questioning the COVID narrative. But I just wanted to, kind of through a throwback. That's the kind of work that we've been doing since the beginning. And for me, it's cool to see an idea of an investigation translate to people in the real world going to the streets to spread information.
And there were quite a bit, if I remember correctly, and it kind of took on a life of its own. And there were other groups that were carrying them out. I think it was a large effect. I think, despite the fact that he ultimately is still, now he's very close to the Trump administration, which doesn't make much sense, but it does if you know the bigger picture. But it's still worth calling him out. And we just got a Brian from High Impact Flicks joining us. Awesome. How you doing, Brian? Thanks for joining.
Oh, good. How you guys doing?
Good. We're just talking about Expose Bill Gates Day. That Derrick's investigation he spearheaded, that kind of went around, but we're kind of just having a large conversation about any number of things. Center new joining, anything on your mind you want to jump in?
What's up, Brian? Thanks for being here, brother.
Hey, man. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate all you guys.
Thank you for the work you do.
Yeah. High Impact Flicks is, one of the group. I remember your work was very inspirational to me when I was kind of, coming up in this for the most part. You were doing a lot of, what it was for me, the most thing, Brian, and we talked about this in interviews over the years. You were one of the very clear standout people out there that was nonpartisan, it was very clearly different. Everyone's fighting within the partisanship and you're out here going, but government's wrong and partisanship's stupid. And I opened my mind to those things a lot. So appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, it just seems to me a very easy thing to do. Just like if you're a moral person and you're saying you're a moral person, then you just stick to your principles. It's not rocket science. I don't know how people can betray their own, sense of morality or their own consciousness by going with a Democrat or Republican Party or backing the government in any way. It's just ludicrous to me.
I agree. And that's what's so hard about this is that it becomes so, I argue it's based on facts that we can prove, but it becomes so clear how wrong this path is. And then you daily have to engage with people that it's like there's opinions out there that I find hard to take seriously, but a lot of people have them. So it becomes difficult to not be short and try to engage with people like that. But I'm with you. It's difficult because some of these things are self-evident in my opinion, but a lot of people fall for it.
I don't know everybody in this room, but I'm pretty sure we have principles, and we would never go to our neighbor to steal a cup of sugar, let alone the car out of their garage. But that's exactly what the government does to us on a daily basis. And then to ask another neighbor to do the very thing that you wouldn't do, it just seems, it's just like, it's not just common sense, but it's the line of morality. It goes back to that. Would you ever initiate unjust force and violence on peaceful people who haven't done anything wrong? The answer is obviously no. Do you think anybody has a higher claim over your life and property than you? The obvious answer is, well, no. Then why are you voting for a government to take over the property or the resources of another person or another country?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want
sense.
I'd like to chime in on this because this has been kind of the ongoing theme today, and the reason I'm here and just introduce you. If you guys are just checking me out with the homeless left, as we started this show in this environment. You guys were sharing the story on Bill Gates earlier, and I just have to say, like, I think one mistake we might make in this space is because we come in an honest way. We're talking about principle. We're talking about moral compasses, and we think. We give credit that other people have these same principles. They just need to have information. So we make this mistake that if we just give the information, they will also apply those principles. But I don't think, and I think Greg said this earlier today, we're talking about wanting to learn, wanting to grow, wanting to get better. I don't think everybody wants that. And that's kind of on them. We can't shake them by the shoulders and make them change that. What those people want is they want to be right. They want to win. And I think that's the problem we see when we battle, when we go head to head with Zionists, when we go head to head with COVIDians, when we go head to head with whatever you want to call it, this two-party capture, when you talk about Trump derangement syndrome, whatever it is that you're coming from, you want to be right. And so COVID, I think, is really the biggest call out of that. It's the biggest exposure because we have all the data, we have all the information, we know everything about it, that people were fooled, but they would rather go down with the ship and not apply these principles because maybe they haven't had it their whole lives and they're not about to change right now when they're dealing with excess sickness and side effects and people are dropping dead. I mean, let's talk about this. I'm saying, like, we know that people, friends, colleagues, family members are getting massive, these what we call side effects. We can't talk about it with them. They're just getting these rapid cancers. They're getting these horrible things happening to them. And we're all affected by this. What can we do? I think we have to just keep applying principle. And when they're ready to do that, they can. But there's only so much we can do in this space. And obviously the people watching and listening and engaging with us feel the same way. So we just have to be louder about it. But I think that's unfortunately, we're not going to be able to reach everyone. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer there. I just think we have to be realists because if everybody had these principles, then every one of these moments would be a wake up aha moment, whether it's Epstein files, whether it's, Gaza, whether it's COVID. I mean, whatever it is, it should be enough, but it's not. And so we just have to accept that not everyone's going to be able to do this, but we can. And the people that we can get out to can. So I'll just say that and leave it with that. But I do have to jump off right now. I'm going to go on podcast with Garland Nixon here in a bit. And I just want to say good people in this space. Thank you guys so much. Ryan, Derrick, everybody. We're going to keep the conversation going on our channel. You guys can find this on Rumble. We do have a new YouTube channel. The first one got terminated, but it's the Homeless Left got terminated, but we're called THL Presents if you guys want to find us on YouTube. So thank you guys so much. And please, guys, donate to the cause. This TLAV has to continue. Obviously, setting this high bar for us over these last several years, it's so important that we keep that standard and keep applying it and be inspired, which we are every day. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate you joining, and tell Garland we said hello as well. Thank you, man.
Okay, definitely.
Just on his point really quickly, it's an important thing to consider, that not everybody is going to be open to what we have to say. And I think we all deal with this. Clearly, we all deal with the frustration of that. But I think we'd all probably likely